The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Dad, just don't come near us, okay? You're not good enough to meet my friends. Lucy slammed the car door so hard I felt it in my bones. She walked toward Maplewood Heights High School without looking back. I sat frozen in my old Ford, watching other parents wave goodbye to their kids. Some fathers got hugs. Others got smiles. I got shame. Lucy's words echoed in my head, each syllable cutting deeper. Not good enough. The phrase settled in my chest like a stone. Other parents glanced at me through their car windows. Did they hear her? Could they see the humiliation burning on my face? I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, trying to hold myself together. Lucy disappeared into the crowd of students, and I realized she was probably telling her friends to stay away from the embarrassing dad in the beat-up car. 15 years of raising her alone, and this was what I got. I wasn't good enough for her world. The morning sun felt too bright for the darkness spreading through my chest. I drove home through familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Every red light gave me more time to replay her words. The venom in her voice. The way she looked at me like I was something to be ashamed of. My hands shook as I turned into my apartment complex. The radio played some upbeat song about dreams coming true, and I snapped it off. Dreams coming true? I was living in a nightmare where my own daughter hated me. Where 15 years of love and sacrifice meant nothing because I wasn't successful enough. I parked in my usual spot and stared at the cracked concrete steps leading to my door. This was my life. A struggling single father in a rundown apartment, driving a car that needed repairs I couldn't afford. No wonder Lucy was embarrassed. The weight of her rejection pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I'd always known I wasn't the dad she deserved. Her mother had made sure I understood that before she left. But hearing it from Lucy's own mouth was different. It was final. I sat in the car for another 10 minutes, afraid to face the empty apartment where her words would echo even louder. Inside my quiet apartment, I walked past the kitchen table where Lucy used to do homework. Now she stayed after school or went to friends' houses, anywhere but here with her embarrassing father. I dropped my keys on the counter and stared at the closed door to my office. Behind that door was my secret. The part of my life Lucy knew nothing about. I opened it slowly, revealing my sanctuary. 2 computer monitors, bookshelves lined with foreign editions, and awards I'd never displayed. Framed book covers with a name that wasn't mine. I was Z.R. Bronson, best-selling novelist. My latest book had sold 3 million copies worldwide. Readers lined up at bookstores for my autograph. Critics called my work brilliant and life-changing. Movie studios fought over adaptation rights. But none of that mattered when your daughter thought you were worthless. I picked up my latest novel, running my fingers over the cover. This book had changed lives, inspired readers, won awards. Yet the one person whose opinion mattered most had no idea I'd written it. To Lucy, I was just the loser dad who embarrassed her at school. I remembered the day Joyce left, taking 5-year-old Lucy with her. "You'll never amount to anything," she'd screamed, throwing clothes into suitcases. Lucy deserves better than a dreamer who can't pay the bills. She'd been pregnant with big plans when we met. By the time Lucy was born, Joyce had decided I was dead weight. The custody battle had been brutal. Joyce painted me as an unstable artist who couldn't provide for a child. She was right about the money part. My first novel hadn't sold yet, and I was waiting tables to survive. The judge gave Joyce primary custody. But Joyce had done something worse than taking Lucy away. She'd filled her head with poison. Every visit became a reminder that Daddy was the failure parent. The one who lived in a small apartment instead of Joyce's new house. By the time I started succeeding as Z.R. Bronson, the damage was done. Lucy was 8 and already looking at me with pity. I'd tried to tell her about my writing, but she just shrugged. Mom says you make up stories because you can't handle real life. The words had cut so deep I'd never brought it up again. I was emptying Lucy's backpack for laundry when I found it. A crumpled invitation to Deborah's sleepover party, decorated with glitter and hearts. BYOB, bring your own books, it read. We're having an all-night reading marathon. The date was this Saturday. My heart sank as I read the details. This was exactly the kind of party I would have loved as a kid. But there was no mention of parents. No request for contact information. I wasn't even considered. The invitation felt like evidence of my irrelevance. Lucy hadn't mentioned the party, probably assuming I wouldn't care or wouldn't be invited anyway. These girls lived in a world where fathers showed up to things. Where dads were successful enough to belong. I smoothed out the wrinkled paper and read it again. Deborah's house was in the wealthy part of town, where parents drove cars that cost more than my yearly rent. Where fathers wore suits to work instead of casual clothes. I set the invitation on the counter and stared at it. My daughter was building a life that didn't include me. Soon, I'd just be the guy who paid half the bills. The next day, I went to Maplewood Books to pick up research materials. The owner always kept the latest releases prominently displayed. As I browsed the fiction section, I heard familiar voices from the young adult area. Oh my God, did you see Z.R. Bronson's new interview? It was Deborah's voice, excited and breathless. He said the sequel comes out next spring. I literally cried reading the last chapter, another girl replied. Like, actual tears. He's such an amazing writer. My mom tried to get me to read romance novels, but I told her Z.R. Bronson is the only author worth reading, a third voice chimed in. I peered around the bookshelf and saw them. Lucy's entire friend group, clutching copies of my books like treasures. Deborah held the hardcover edition of my latest novel, while another girl had dog-eared paperbacks of my entire series. They were completely obsessed. Lucy stood among them, nodding along but looking uncomfortable. Yeah, he's okay, I guess, she said with a shrug. Okay? Deborah gasped. Lucy, he's only the best writer alive. I would literally die if I could meet him. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. I spent the rest of the day wrestling with the discovery. Part of me wanted to march into Lucy's room and reveal everything. Show her the fan mail, the award certificates, the movie contracts. Make her understand that her loser father was actually someone worth knowing. But I knew Lucy better than that. She'd accuse me of lying, of trying to show off. Worse, she might think I'd been deceiving her all these years. Our relationship was fragile enough without adding betrayal to the mix. There was also the practical side. My anonymity was part of my brand. Z.R. Bronson was mysterious, unreachable. Revealing my identity to a group of teenage girls would mean the end of my privacy. Within hours, it would be all over social media. So I decided to stay silent, at least for now. Let Lucy discover on her own who I really was, if she ever cared enough to look. But the knowledge sat in my chest like a secret burning to get out. Her friends were obsessed with my work, and she had no idea. Maybe someday she'd be proud of me. Maybe someday she'd understand that being a dreamer wasn't the same as being a failure. The next morning at school pickup, Lucy made sure I understood my place. She spotted me in the car line and walked over with her friends trailing behind her. My heart lifted for a moment, thinking she might actually introduce me. Instead, she leaned down to my window and whispered harshly, "Dad, just stay in the car, please. Don't get out. Don't wave. Just, don't." Her friend stood a few feet away, curious but polite. Deborah gave me a small smile, and I recognized her as the girl from the bookstore. The one who would literally die to meet Z.R. Bronson. "Hi, Mr. Hayes," Deborah said sweetly. "Lucy talks about you all the time." Lucy's face went red. No, I don't. Get in the car, okay? She practically pushed her friends away from my window, as if my presence might contaminate them. I watched them pile into a newer car driven by another parent, someone deemed worthy of their company. Through the back window, I could see them laughing and talking, probably about their weekend plans. The dismissal stung worse than yesterday's insult. At least then she'd been angry. Now she was just ashamed. As they walked away, Deborah suddenly stopped and came back to my car. "Mr. Hayes? Is that your writing?" She pointed to a piece of paper on my passenger seat. It was a rough draft of a chapter from my upcoming novel, covered in handwritten notes. My heart stopped. "Oh, that's just work stuff. Nothing important." I quickly flipped the paper over, but not before she'd seen enough to be curious. "It looked really good," she said, her eyes bright with interest. "Like, professional good. Do you write books?" Lucy appeared at Deborah's shoulder, looking mortified. "Deb, come on. It's probably just work reports or something boring." She grabbed her friend's arm and pulled her away. But I'd seen the look in Deborah's eyes. The spark of recognition. She'd read enough of my work to know good writing when she saw it. And something about those few lines had caught her attention in a way that work reports never would. "See you later, Mr. Hayes," Deborah called over her shoulder as Lucy dragged her away. But she kept looking back at my car, at the spot where she'd seen my writing. I sat there for a long moment, wondering if I'd just made a mistake. That evening, my phone buzzed with an email from my publisher. "Congratulations. Your latest novel has hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for the third consecutive week. The media is calling it your best work yet." I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar disconnect between my two lives. Z.R. Bronson was celebrating success that would change other people's lives forever. Sunday Hayes was sitting alone in his apartment, eating microwaved dinner. At dinner, Lucy barely looked up from her phone. "I'm going to Deborah's sleepover Saturday," she announced. "Her mom's driving us both ways, so you don't have to worry about it." The message was clear: she didn't want me anywhere near her social life. I was the embarrassing parent who stayed hidden away, safely out of sight. "That sounds fun," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "What are you planning to do?" Lucy shrugged. "Just normal sleepover stuff. Movies, music, whatever." She didn't mention the books. Didn't mention that her friends were obsessed with an author whose latest chapter was sitting on my desk. "Have you ever read Z.R. Bronson?" I asked carefully. "Who?" Lucy looked genuinely confused. "He's a pretty popular author." "Dad, that's so embarrassing. You don't know anything about what's popular." The next day at pickup, Deborah seemed different. More focused. She walked straight to my car window while Lucy was talking to another friend. "Mr. Hayes, I've been thinking about what I saw yesterday," she said quietly. "That writing style. It reminded me so much of my favorite author, Z.R. Bronson. Have you ever read his books?" My mouth went dry. "I might have seen them around," I managed. "The way you described that scene, the specific word choices, it was just so similar to his voice." She leaned closer, studying my face. "You write just like our favorite author." Lucy appeared and caught the end of the conversation. She laughed, loud and harsh. "Deb, you're crazy. My dad doesn't write anything important. He just does freelance stuff for websites." "But Lucy, I'm telling you, the way he..." "Drop it, okay?" Lucy's voice was sharp with embarrassment. "Trust me, my dad is not some famous writer." Deborah looked between us, confused by Lucy's reaction. I could see her putting pieces together in her mind, but Lucy's dismissal was planting doubt. How could someone's own daughter not know if her father was a successful author? "Maybe I was wrong," Deborah said slowly, but her eyes stayed on me. She wasn't convinced. Lucy relaxed. Yeah, you were definitely wrong. Parent-teacher night arrived like a storm I couldn't avoid. Lucy had specifically asked me not to embarrass her, which meant sitting quietly in the back and letting Joyce's husband, Thomas, play the role of a real dad figure in conversations with teachers. I watched from across the room as Lucy proudly introduced Thomas to her English teacher. This is my stepdad. He's the one who really helps me with my school stuff. The teacher smiled and shook Thomas's hand, completely ignoring me. Lucy's doing wonderful work in creative writing, the teacher said. She has a real gift for storytelling. Must run in the family. Thomas beamed. We encourage her artistic side at home. I think she gets it from her mother's side. I stood there, invisible, listening to another man take credit for my daughter's talents. The same talents that had made me millions of dollars and touched millions of lives. Mr. Hayes? The teacher finally noticed me. Are you Lucy's father? I said quietly. Oh. The awkward pause stretched like a wound. Well, Lucy's very talented. Thank you, I said, but Lucy was already pulling Thomas toward the next classroom. I followed behind like a ghost, watching my daughter erase me from her story. After everyone left, Deborah approached me in the empty hallway. Her parents were deep in conversation with the math teacher, giving her a few minutes alone. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you something directly, she said, looking around to make sure no one could hear. Are you Z.R. Bronson? The question hung in the air between us. I could deny it, maintain the lie that had protected my secret for years. Or I could trust this girl who clearly loved my work more than my own daughter did. If I was, I said carefully, would you keep it quiet? Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. Oh my God. You are him, aren't you? She pressed her hands to her mouth to keep from screaming. I looked around the empty hallway and made a decision that would change everything. Yes. But Deborah, you cannot tell anyone. Especially not Lucy. But why? She's your daughter. She should be so proud. Lucy doesn't think much of her father right now, I said sadly. Learning I've been lying to her won't make that better. Deborah stared at me with something close to worship. I can't believe this. Lucy's dad is Z.R. Bronson. Thank you, I said, and meant it. That means more than you know. Can I tell the others? I hesitated. Give me until Saturday. Saturday night, my phone buzzed constantly with texts I couldn't read. The sleepover was happening, and I had a feeling my secret wasn't a secret anymore. Around midnight, I heard a car in the driveway. Raised voices. Lucy's key in the lock. She burst through the door like a hurricane, her eyes wild with fury and embarrassment. Behind her, I could see headlights pulling away. The sleepover had ended early. You lying piece of garbage, she screamed, throwing her overnight bag at my feet. How could you do this to me? How could you make me look so stupid? Lucy, what? Don't. Just don't. Tears streamed down her face. Deborah told everyone. She couldn't help herself. And now they all know that my dad is some famous writer and I had no idea. I reached for her, but she backed away. Sweetheart, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me my whole life? That while I was defending you as just some regular guy, you were secretly rich and famous? The pain in her voice cut through me. This was exactly what I'd feared. She wasn't proud or excited. She was devastated. They kept asking me about your books, your awards, your money. And I had to keep saying I didn't know. She ran to her room and slammed the door. The next morning, I was drinking coffee and trying to figure out how to fix everything when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see 4 teenage girls standing on my porch, clutching books and looking nervous. Lucy's friends had come to see Z.R. Bronson in person. I opened the door to find Deborah, plus 3 other girls I recognized from school pickup. They all held copies of my novels, some worn from multiple readings. "Mr. Hayes," Deborah said formally, "we were wondering, could we please have your autograph?" The request was so simple, so innocent, but it felt like an earthquake. These girls were treating me like someone important. Someone worth meeting. After years of being dismissed and ignored, here were teenagers who actually wanted my signature. I looked toward Lucy's closed bedroom door. "Are you sure you want this? Lucy's pretty upset right now." "Please," another girl said. "We promise we won't bother you again. We love your books so much." Behind them, I saw neighbors peering out their windows. Word would spread quickly in a complex this small. By tonight, everyone would know that the quiet single dad in apartment 4B was actually a celebrity. I took the first book with trembling hands. "What's your name?" "Hannah," the girl whispered, starstruck. Lucy's bedroom door flew open. She emerged like a storm, her hair messy from sleep, her face red with fresh anger. "Are you kidding me right now?" she shouted at her friends. "You came to my house to get autographs from my dad? After I told you how upset I was?" The girls stepped back, surprised by her fury. "Lucy, we just—" "Get out," she screamed. "All of you, just get out." "But Lucy," Deborah tried to explain, "your dad is amazing. You should be proud." "Proud? Proud?" Lucy's voice cracked. "He lied to me for years. He let me think we were poor while he was secretly rich." She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "And you? You're loving this, aren't you? Finally getting the attention you always wanted." The girls backed away from our front door, clutching their signed books and looking terrified. This wasn't the heartwarming father-daughter reunion they'd expected to witness. "Lucy, please," I started. "Save it for your next book," she spat. "I'm sure this will make a great story. The ungrateful daughter who didn't appreciate her genius father." She grabbed her jacket and pushed past her friends. "Don't follow me," she told them. By Monday morning, the entire school knew. I could feel it the moment I pulled into the pickup line. Parents stared at my car with new interest. Some pointed. Others whispered behind their hands. Lucy walked out of school surrounded by a bubble of attention she clearly hated. Students followed her, asking questions about her famous father. Teachers smiled at her with new warmth. "Is it true your dad wrote the Shadowland series? Can you get us free books? Why didn't you ever mention he was famous?" Lucy kept her head down, pushing through the crowd toward my car. When she got in, she slammed the door so hard the whole car shook. "This is a nightmare," she muttered. "Everyone's treating me like our school." Lucy sank lower in her seat, mortified by the attention. "Can we just go? Please?" As we drove away, I could see students pulling out their phones, probably posting about their discovery. By tomorrow, it would be all over social media. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Joyce stood at my door in an expensive outfit I didn't recognize, holding a newspaper with my author photo on the front page. Well, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "Looks like the deadbeat dad finally made something of himself." "Joyce, what are you doing here?" "I came to see my successful ex-husband," she said, looking around the apartment with new eyes. "This place is a lot smaller than I expected for someone who's supposedly worth millions." She'd done her research. The newspaper article had included estimated earnings, book sales figures, movie deal rumors. Numbers that made her suddenly very interested in my life. "I think we need to discuss Lucy's future," Joyce continued. "She should be living with the parent who can provide the best opportunities. Private school, tutoring, college prep. The implication was clear. She wanted custody back, now that I was financially successful. The same woman who'd called me a worthless dreamer was ready to profit from my dreams coming true. "Lucy's fine where she is," I said. "Is she?" "Because from what I hear, she's pretty upset about all your lies." Joyce smiled coldly. "Maybe she'd be happier with a parent who's always been honest." "Honest?" I couldn't help laughing. "You filled her head with poison about me for 10 years. You made her ashamed of her own father." "I told her the truth," Joyce shot back. "That you were a failure who couldn't provide for his family. And when I started succeeding? When the books took off and the money came in? You could have encouraged her to reconnect with me. Instead, you made sure she stayed distant." Joyce's mask slipped for a moment. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know. Because a successful me meant you'd been wrong all along. It meant you'd destroyed a relationship between a father and daughter for nothing. You lied to her," Joyce accused. "For years, you let her think you were struggling. I was protecting my privacy. And trying to rebuild a relationship you'd poisoned. Every time I tried to share my success with Lucy, she dismissed it as delusions." Joyce stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Well, she believes in you now. And she hates you for it. Congratulations, Sunday." Neither of us noticed Lucy standing in the hallway, listening to every word. "Mom?" Lucy's voice was small, confused. She'd been so quiet we hadn't heard her come in. Joyce spun around, her expression shifting instantly to maternal concern. "Sweetheart. I was just..." "You were just what?" Lucy stepped into the living room, looking between us. "Talking about how you made me hate Dad on purpose." "Lucy, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Lucy's voice was gaining strength. "You made me think Dad was a loser because you were embarrassed that you left him. And when he became successful, you couldn't admit you were wrong." Joyce reached for her daughter, but Lucy stepped back. "All these years, I thought Dad was the problem. But it was you, wasn't it? Your father lied to you," Joyce tried desperately. "He should have told you. Maybe he would have if you hadn't spent 10 years convincing me he was worthless." Lucy's voice cracked. "Every time he tried to share his writing with me, I shot him down because you taught me to think he was delusional. I watched my daughter piece together the truth, seeing our relationship through new eyes. The failed conversations, the dismissals, the way she'd been programmed to reject anything I offered. How many times did he try to tell me?" Lucy asked. "How many times did I shut him down?" 3 days later, my publisher called with an opportunity one couldn't refuse. "The National Literary Festival wants you as their keynote speaker," she said. "It's next weekend. Sold-out crowd, media coverage, the works." "I don't know," I said, looking at Lucy doing homework at the kitchen table. We'd barely spoken since Joyce's visit. "Sunday, this is huge. They're calling it a celebration of contemporary American literature." Lucy looked up from her textbook. "What's that about?" "A speaking engagement," I said carefully. "Literary festival downtown." "The National Literary Festival?" Her eyes widened. "Deborah mentioned that. She and her mom have tickets. She said it's like the biggest book event of the year." I could see the wheels turning in her head. Part of her was still angry, but part of her was curious. For the first time, she was seeing me as someone other people respected. "Would you want to come?" I asked. Lucy bit her lip, considering. "I don't know. Would I have to sit on stage with you or anything embarrassing?" "Just in the audience. You could bring friends if you want." She was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe. Let me think about it." That evening, I heard her on the phone with Deborah, discussing the festival. For the first time in days, she sounded excited about something involving me. The Grand Theater was packed with 1,000 people. From backstage, I could see the crowd settling into their seats, programs rustling, cameras flashing. This was the biggest audience I'd ever faced as myself, not hiding behind a pen name. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Z.R. Bronson. The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage. Spotlight blinded me for a moment, but as my eyes adjusted, I scanned the audience looking for familiar faces. There, in the third row, sat Lucy with Deborah and her mother. My daughter looked small in the sea of adults, but she was there. I began my speech about the power of storytelling, about how books could change lives and connect strangers across the world. The audience hung on every word, laughing at my jokes, nodding at my insights. But I only cared about one person. Lucy sat forward in her seat, listening intently as I described my writing process, my inspiration, my hope that stories could heal wounded hearts. Writing taught me that truth isn't always about facts, I said, looking directly at her. Sometimes truth is about understanding. About forgiveness. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Cameras flashed, people shouted questions, but I only saw Lucy wiping tears from her eyes. Backstage, Lucy found me sitting alone in the green room, still overwhelmed by the response. She knocked softly on the open door. "Dad? Can I come in?" I looked up to see my daughter's face streaked with tears, but her expression was different than it had been all week. Softer. More open. "I had no idea," she whispered, sitting down beside me. "I mean, I knew you were successful, but seeing all those people, they love you." "Lucy." "No, let me finish." She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I said, for how I treated you. You were trying to tell me for years, weren't you?" I pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart." "But I did understand," she said, pulling back to look at me. "That's the worst part. Deep down, I knew you were special. I just couldn't admit it because Mom had convinced me that believing in you was stupid." We sat in silence for a moment, both crying now. "Am I too late?" Lucy asked. "Did I ruin everything between us?" "Never," I said firmly. "But respect isn't something I can give you, Lucy. It's something you have to choose." Joyce appeared in the doorway, having somehow talked her way backstage. She looked around the green room, taking in the flowers, the congratulatory cards, the evidence of my success. "Quite a show," she said, her voice tight with forced civility. "It doesn't change anything," I said calmly. "I'm still the same person I was yesterday. The same person who lied to his daughter for years." Lucy stood up, positioning herself between Joyce and me. "Mom, stop. Just stop. Lucy, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Lucy's voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years. "You're embarrassed that you were wrong about Dad. You're embarrassed that you made me hate someone who never deserved it." Joyce's composure cracked. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From having a father I could be proud of. From knowing that someone loved me enough to sacrifice his public recognition for my privacy." Joyce looked between us, realizing she'd lost. The successful ex-husband she'd dismissed was standing in a room full of flowers and praise, while their daughter defended him. "This isn't over," Joyce said, but her threat sounded hollow. "Yes, it is," Lucy said firmly. "Dad, I want to live with you full-time. If that's okay." I looked at my daughter, seeing her clearly for the first time in years. "More than okay." 6 months later, I pulled into the Maplewood Heights pickup line with my usual mixture of nerves and hope. But this time was different. This time, Lucy was waiting for me with a smile. "Dad," she called out, jogging over to the car with Deborah and 2 other friends. Perfect timing. I told everyone you'd be here. She leaned down to my window, but instead of whispering instructions to stay hidden, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Guys, this is my dad. You know, Z.R. Bronson. Deborah grinned. We've met, she said. Several times now. Could you sign my copy of your new book? Asked Hannah, pulling out a fresh hardcover. I got out of the car for the first time in years, standing in the pickup line like any other parent. Other fathers and mothers approached with their own copies of my books, asking for signatures and pictures. Lucy stood beside me, beaming with pride. That's my dad, she told anyone who would listen. He's pretty amazing. As I signed books and answered questions, I caught Lucy's eye. She mouthed two words that made everything worth it: thank you. Later, driving home together, Lucy said, you know what's funny? All this time I thought you weren't good enough for my friends. That's not true, I said quickly. But it could have been. If I hadn't figured it out. She looked out the window. I'm glad I did. Dad? Lucy said as we got out of the car. I love you. And I'm proud to be your daughter. The words I'd waited 15 years to hear.